Kia ora tātou, ko Nick Jones aho, ko Nessie taku mahi. I'm Nick Jones from Nessie, one of your co-hosts this week. And as happens for co-hosts, like last year when I opened the conference for Mick, I'm here to welcome our next guest a little bit last minute. So here it goes. Hope this works out, and apologies in advance, Rania. So thanks, Rod, for a great talk. And actually both your and Amber's mention of remote collaboration reminded me of actually APAN 26, which was in Queenstown in 2008. Anyone go to APAN 26? I reckon you were there, Vlad. Yes, Wallace, okay. Not David Honey? I think he might have been. Yeah, I'm pretty sure I got a photo of you there, David. We, and specifically Rianne's, managed to convince one of our telcos to direct drop fibre into the conference venue. And working with Shimizu-san, we undertook a telemedicine demo of a live surgical procedure via experimental 4K across 2 locations in New Zealand, with research clinicians consulting live from Auckland, a surgical procedure in Japan, clinicians in South Korea and perhaps Singapore on a live colorectal surgery. It was a blast, if somewhat confronting. So it just goes to show how long it takes when driving technology at the bleeding edge. Had to do it. So thanks, Amber, thanks, Rod. Wonderful, we'll get to do that again, perhaps. I recommend it, not for the faint-hearted though. And not least for the groundwork you've just laid for our next speaker, Ian Foster, hailing from Chicago. Ian is a pioneer of distributed research computing, building experimental facilities that span the globe since the early to mid-90s, somewhere around there, Ian. Ian is a UC alum, being University of Canterbury. He's an expat Kiwi who went on to a stellar academic career, recognised as a top computer scientist globally. He's a professor at Chicago and leads the Division of Data Science and Learning at Argonne National Lab. Minister Collins will be pleased to know Ian is a successful entrepreneur, having founded the highly successful Globus platform, a global platform for science data management, enabling scientific data science at very large scales. We often depend on Globus here in New Zealand to connect our HPC facilities and other experimental facilities and instruments to securely share huge volumes of data effortlessly, with little friction. Ian is a runner, a sailor, and a friend. While I can attest to his ability to follow the flock of sheep, it's only when he runs in the Wairarapa. Ask him for the videos. Ian has been highly influential on my career and therefore on Nessie. He's curious, humble, and tirelessly collaborative. So it's obviously my great pleasure, with short notice, to ask you to join me in welcoming Ian to the stage. Haere mai, Ian, welcome home.
Thank you for those kind words of introduction. I did expect, I thought you'd promised to do the whole introduction in Te Reo, but apparently not. There you go. So. All right, so I'm going to talk about something different, large language models for science. This is an area that I've been quite involved in the last few years at Argonne National Lab, and also at the University of Chicago, where quite a few of our students are involved in these topics. And I'm sure some of you here are absolute experts in this area and know more than me, and others perhaps are less knowledgeable. So I'm going to try and fairly quickly cover the following topics. I'll say a few words about what large language models are and how they work, and then talk about various aspects of how they may be applied in the scientific context, showing how you can use them to extract, distill, and synthesize knowledge. Interesting work that people are doing on applying them to sequences other than natural language, and then some work that we're doing at Argonne, building large foundation models, language models, initially at least for science in this project called the Aurora GPT project. And I'll say a few words about a thing called the Trillion Parameter Consortium that I know some people from New Zealand are already involved in. So large language models, ChatGPT, etc., we of course hear about them all the time, and they are presented as being either or anything from killer AIs that are about to eliminate us all to to less mundane, more mundane things. But basically they're very simple technologies in a way, enormously complicated in their implementation, but very simple. They're statistical pattern recognition and prediction systems. They're trained on vast amounts of typically natural language text, and based on that they set parameters in these large neural networks so that they can predict accurately the next most likely word in a sequence. So given a sequence, they will come up with additional words that build on that sequence that are likely to occur given the probabilities that they've observed in their training data. So more specifically, the sequence might be a prompt that you provide to it, plus a question and some other things. The training data could be billions of scientific documents, and they come up with additional tokens based on that, on what they've learned and what you've shown them. So in a sense, it's almost trivial technology. Of course, the miraculous part of it is, first of all, the technologies used to train these things, and second, the strain, often surprising emergent behaviors that you get from them. So anyway, say a few words about what they're trained on. At least the models you or I will mostly work with, ChatGPT and the equivalent, are trained on large amounts of natural language text. One commonly used data set is this thing called the pile, which is about a terabyte of data, some web data, scientific papers, patents, books, archive, various code repositories, collections of math problems, philosophical papers, legal papers, collections of computer code, maybe I already said that, and the so-called common crawl, which is a large quantity of web data. Now, we could talk about this at great length, but I'll just say a few things. One is there is some controversy about what goes into this pile. For example, this Books 3 corpus, I think we can see somewhere there, has, actually I don't see it, Bibliotech, I think it's called here, has various books that have not been legally acquired by the people who created the training set. So that creates concern among many, I think. Other people are concerned that certain information is not in there. You know, if you're a scientist, you want to have lots of scientific data. If you're a New Zealand administrator, you might want to have New Zealand administrative codes in there so that the models know about that. Or you might not want to have that. So there are interesting issues to discuss about what goes into these training corpuses. One thing we do know is that the ChatGPT and the like are trained on far more than this data, because we don't actually know exactly what they're trained on, and this is an ongoing issue of discussion. Anyway, so this is the training data, lots and lots of text. Increasingly also lots and lots of images and video and so forth, but we won't say more about that. Then the models themselves have huge numbers of parameters. They're neural networks with parameters. These are things for which values are going to be assigned during the training process. GPT-3 had 175 billion. GPT-4, the latest version of ChatGPT, has maybe a trillion, sorry. Not quite sure about that. Bigger may be yet better. And then the training process, it's again very, at least at the simplistic level, very simple. We're training them, as I said, to predict the next word in sentences. There's a series of additional tuning tasks, fine-tuning, where we train them to answer questions, which is what makes ChatGPT work. And then various versions of reinforcement learning with human feedback that seek to stop models saying rude things about certain classes of people or whatever you may not want to have happen. And there's a whole industry of academics trying to work out how you can get around this to prove that the networks have limitations. The most amusing version I read recently was people found out if you queried one of these models, maybe ChatGPT, in Gaelic, it would tend to give you answers that were not fit for public consumption, while if you answered the same questions in English, it would do fine. Anyway, so that's sort of strange. Anyway, so you've all played with ChatGPT and you've used it for things. Let me talk about some of the things that we're using these models for in the scientific context. And I'll talk about three: knowledge extraction, knowledge distillation, and knowledge synthesis. And by the way, I realize I didn't bring my phone up here, so I don't know what the time is, so someone should give me some warning. Maybe you'll do that. Good. So these are very simple things want to do. Ask a model what it knows about something. Ask it to summarize knowledge about some topic, and ask it to bring knowledge together from many sources. And so it's interesting to try these things on these models, and often it's surprising how much they do know and how well they can summarize things. We're interested in that. We're also interested in how to use those abilities within scientific workflows. So I'll say a bit about that as well. So first of all, knowledge extraction. So this is, if you can read the fine print in green, this is a typical sort of knowledge extraction prompt that we might use. Please tell me, using the knowledge you've been trained on, what you know about this human gene and gene product. And there's an example, the red. And in particular, we want to know, is this gene well studied? Is the gene essential for survival? Is it mutated? If it's mutated, what impact does it have? A whole set of things you might want to ask. And then you can get back this is an answer from ChatGPT, which has got large amounts of information, which I won't go through here. I'm sure there's someone in the room who, if they looked at the fine print, might be able to see if this is mostly correct or not. But in general, my colleagues in biology seem quite intrigued by the answers they get from here. So that's knowledge extraction. So why would you do that? Well, you might want to extract knowledge in order to, because you yourself want to know the answer to that question. But more interestingly, perhaps you want to use it as part of some automated problem solving or research process. So, for example, students of ours have been building out what we call agents. Basically, they're things that you can ask questions of, and it will query PubMed or other databases using ChatGPT to come up with a hypothesis. For example, you might ask, given this something, information, which organism is a particular peptide acting on? And you get back a text answer, of course. And then you could, as we've done in this pipeline that we've developed or are developing at the University of Chicago and Argonne, we can use it to identify antimicrobial peptides. So you have a set of peptides, in this, obviously you'd like those to be generated synthetically, and I'll talk about how you might do that in a minute. But then given a set of peptides, you can query PubMed to ask what these peptides might act on, and you'll get back information. The answers of this sort, they may be correct or incorrect, but hopefully they contain some useful information. Then you might go ahead and do some computational activities, aligning those peptides with various proteins, evaluating structures either by a combination of large language model or simulation, and then eventually come up with some candidates that you could evaluate experimentally. So I present this to you as an example of how these models can be used today in a very useful fashion to accelerate research processes. You're not depending on them giving you absolutely correct answers, but you are using the information that they provide with some assumption, at least, or a hope, which you can evaluate, that they are providing you information that would have taken you much longer to get yourself. Okay, so that's sort of knowledge extraction. Knowledge distillation is sort of maybe a similar but different activity. Instead of asking what they know about a particular gene, Here we may be asking them to summarize the contents of a scientific paper, for example. So here's a paper which I know nothing about, I must admit, but this is a summary that was provided when ChatGPT was prompted about this paper. It lists, gives the title, yeah, that's all right, the key findings, a list of key findings, which it does a pretty good job at, a main result, and hypotheses. And in this case, it seems to have done a good job. Proposes a hypothesis that this gene family plays a significant role, et cetera, et cetera. So now we've gone from just getting facts to actually extracting information, key information from a paper. So then the third thing we might use our models for is what we could call knowledge synthesis, combining information from many sources, multiple papers, combining that information and then using it to synthesize something. And here's an example of what one might want to synthesize. Here's another prompt. Please generate an experiment plan to test the following hypothesis. And this is the hypothesis generated from what did I call it before? The distillation process. So this is a hypothesis in red. Here we've got our prompt asking it to generate an experiment plan. Using a plug-in to ChatGPT called Consensus. This is the experiment plan that it came up with. Have I got it in more? Oh, here is in more detail. So it talks about its task, its objective, the experimental design, rather perhaps lacking detail in some aspects, but it seems to be, and I'm not a biologist, but my biology friends seem at least intrigued by this, collecting tumor samples, classifying them, performing some PCR and RNA sequencing to quantify expression levels, seems reasonable. Do some Western blotting. I guess you can also ask it to fine-tune your Western blots so they look good in your biology papers. That was sort of a bad joke about recent dramas with, misconduct, and so forth, analysis. So, and they even have ethical considerations at the end. So, of course, if this was a better talk, I would now be able to present the results of the experiments that we performed based on this experiment plan. We don't have that, but we have students hard at work on working out how to automate the mapping of these protocols, or the protocols employed in these processes to instructions for the opentrons and other experimental apparatus that we use. So far, looking promising, but it's early days. So I hope at least that's given you some flavor of what the least intriguing things that one can do with these large language models. Working with the scientific literature, in this case, to extract and synthesize information and come up with plans for research tasks, which, well, I think at least shows some promise. Okay, so this is all, everything I've described so far has been based on conventional ChatGPT-like models that have been trained on whatever it is that the companies that create these models train them on, which we assume is some amount of scientific text, but based on conversations with them is primarily web and other content. What else might one want to train these models, these sorts of models on? Well, one thing we might want to do is train them on not language at all, but train them on, say, protein sequences or genetic sequences. And that's there's a fascinating paper that came out recently that did this. They trained a large language model, but not on any natural language text, but rather on a whole sequence of protein sequences, and came up with a protein language model, which they could then use to generate, they can tune the degree to which it adheres to what is known or diverges from it. It can predict protein sequences that are similar to but different from known protein sequences. For example, lysozymes, which are lysozymes, which are a form of an antibacterial protein. They can generate similar sequences that you can then evaluate in various ways, either computationally or via experiment, and decide whether you may have got a more promising antimicrobial protein that you could use to fight new diseases. And that's something that actually we're doing at Argonne as well. Another interesting issue, but here working with genetic sequences, some of my colleagues are training foundation models on large language models, basically on large numbers of viral sequences, and then evolving these forward to see what COVID variants might be possible. They don't involve many mutations. They are consistent with what is known about viral biology, and then testing those to see which are most likely to survive in the environment. And you could use this then to potentially detect new variants of concern for COVID. Okay, I want to say a few words about foundation models, which is another word you've probably heard. If a large language model is a foundation model might be trained on more than just language. The interesting sort of an interesting event of the last few years is people realizing that while for some time we thought we'd take a large language model, you'd train it up, then you'd fine-tune it to some purpose like machine translation, and it would do that thing well. Now we seem to be finding that you can take, with models trained on enough text and other data and with enough parameters, they can do lots of things well without this fine-tuning process. It seems each week we learn something that they can do well that we didn't previously think they could do. So you end up with a foundation model that may or may not be adapted to a variety of different tasks. And this is what people like Meta and OpenAI are spending a lot of time working on. Now, we'd like to do similar things for science. And I've talked about some of these things that we've already talked about, extracting information from millions of papers, combining information for things like program synthesis, and then generating plans of various sorts, for example, programming self-driving labs. And this thing on the right here is just pointing out the number of different programming languages that ChatGPT seems to generate reasonable code for, certainly more than I know myself. So we're engaged in a process at Argonne building out a model which we currently are calling Aurora GPT. Aurora is our new supercomputer at Argonne. The goal is to, our hypothesis, I guess, is that by taking a large language model architecture of the sort used by the likes of OpenAI and others, and then training it specifically on not only the data they train on, but large amounts of scientific data, more scientific papers and texts, also structured scientific data, could be genomic data, protein-protein interaction network information, materials information. We can create a model that will act more effectively as a scientific assistant than the examples I just showed you. So we don't yet know whether that's true or not, but we hope to find out over the next year or so. And we're working with various international partners so that it'll know how to read Japanese and other language literature and data. How important that is, we don't yet know, but there's some indication that it may be. And ultimately, we want to engage not just text, but also images, tables, equations, proofs. Lots of interesting work being done on proof, automated theorem proving, etc. And how to do all those things, we don't necessarily know, but we're working with people to find out. And as part of this activity, we've established this consortium, the Trillion Parameter Consortium, that has a lot of participants. I'll show you a list in a minute. Well, not too much more to say that, except we're starting with text, moving to additional modalities in hopefully starting next year. Initially working with a lot of the pile, but not the illegal parts, not the books, and other scientific article sources that we're working to engage. And then additional sources from various locations. For example, the ACM, the Association for Computing Machinery, has given us their archive of articles in computer science, and we hope to get other similar ones as well to integrate. And this is the vision. In the middle here are the things that people already tend to engage, with some exceptions. On the left here, the scientific and engineering data sets, that's what we want to work out how to engage. And the goal is to have a model that's good at a wide range of downstream tasks that AI seems to be doing well at so far, but we think can do better. Discovering new materials, inverse design of biological and materials systems, code optimization, surrogate models for simulation, autonomous experiments, and so on and so forth. This is the computer we're using. Should be more than 2 exaflops, double precision, maybe up to 10 exaflops at half precision, which we can use for a lot of training purposes. 60,000 GPUs, and let's see, a list of founding partners, and Nessie is one of them. So, congratulations. Yeah. Well, we look forward to working with you. So I wanted to. I'm so pleased I could come in here and talk to you about this, because we'd love to have New Zealand collaborators in all of these things. Thank you.
Thank you so much for being with us today. Your talk explained how large language models actually work. I know that we've all tried, or at least commonly used, ChatGPT. It was quite interesting to know the background about it, and the controversy and knowledge extraction from and around language models. Thank you again, Ian. I hope you enjoy your time in New Zealand back here. It is lovely seeing a Kiwi doing it big in the US.